you really, really went out of your way to ensure that the facility was top of the line, and you had the livestock, the organisms, as your number one priority. And we really appreciate that. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of CVtv Podcast. My name is Carlos, and I'm here with David Dawkins, owner of CoralVue, and our special guest today, Mark Vera from Seastainable Supply. So, Mark, before we get started here, you've been in the hobby for a long, long time. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
I've been in the hobby as long as you, and actually you taught me a lot of my stuff at the beginning. So it's been, when you say it's been a long time, it's because we're all getting old. But
back when we had hair,
right? Yeah, I've been in the hobby since I was about 15 years old. And I've never, I can say in that time, never been without a fish tank. But as far as making it a career, after doing it for a long time, working at pet shops when I was a teenager and doing all that, I went to the corporate world and I came right back to this because it's an addiction you just can't live without. So yeah, my background is primarily working in some different biolabs and doing some things like that. Being a volunteer diver down at public aquariums, at the Shed Aquarium and things, working in the husbandry department there, doing some different stuff to kind of build out my skill set. And then having a couple different companies, from service companies, and then moving on to consultations only and aquatech, and now into the import business.
Very nice.
I remember you used to also do phytoplankton. Remember back in the days?
Still do. I just do it for myself. We did phytoplanktons, and we aquacultured different types of zooplanktons, lots of different types of foods. And I spent a lot of time and did a lot of education in aquatic nutrition, from looking at food webs and then going up into actually fish feed.
That's fantastic. So, Mark, Dave and I are, we always talk about journeys, especially when we bring somebody as a guest. It's like, how did you get from, because I know by trade, you're also a graphic designer. I know that.
Yeah.
So you do marketing, but how did you get from there all the way to fish and coral imports?
I worked in marketing and advertising for about a decade. And I realized life's too short to spend the whole time behind a desk and sleeping under one. Advertising in general is pretty competitive. I was a young man, and I decided that I wanted to do what I loved. I was in a good position to do it, and so I just started coming back to the aquatics and said I want to find my niche in it. And the way I came to that, the journey was working in several different capacities, working for different people, working in volunteer status, working in laboratories, working in different opportunities, and kind of combining all that and saying, okay, I'm going to cobble this together and make my own type of career. And that's where I ended up. And aquatech was kind of the start of that. Was I had some good skill sets in specific things. I saw some niches where there was some opportunity and some need, and I just jumped in and started building it that way.
Very nice.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's you've done well for yourself. I mean, every time we see the trade shows, and now you're here in Chicago for the kind of like doing business for importing fish for the wholesalers. So it seems like you've done well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it takes a team, and I've got an incredible wife, and she's been there right by my side all the way through. And even down to my daughter. I mean, she started working in all of our businesses from the age of like 3. So yeah, she's been at all the trade shows and still misses a bunch of them. And it's been a big part of our life. It's something that we've lived, and much like you guys, you live it because you love it.
Yep.
Yeah, we do.
Mark, can you give us some insight into what it takes or to import fish and corals, and maybe some of the challenges that come with that?
This is only an hour, right?
Yeah.
There's, it's a huge amount of challenges. One thing that I've always been good at is pivoting and being able to adapt. And that's one of the things that is a critical skill set with this industry, and especially with importing, because if it can go wrong, it probably will. Mm-hmm. The biggest challenges most people would think is keeping the animals alive. It's not. It's logistics. When you're doing and importing and moving livestock, our discussions at our facility is the animals always come first, right? So the animal welfare and the animal's health is our top priority. So that means putting the least amount of stress on these animals as possible. And in order to do that, that means making their journey as short as possible and as efficient as possible. And so to do that, we have to basically work with logistics, right down from booking the flight and finding the shortest one that gets in, that's in the time that Fish and Wildlife will be open and working, and our staff to be available. And then right down through looking out for snow and weather, not even in the US. I mean, I had a flight one time land in Anchorage, Alaska, and in the jet engine had sucked in a huge chunk of ice, blew off all of the impellers, and we had to wait 18 hours while they flew out a part to repair the plane and move our product. And that's going to come in rough. And so
I think what you're saying with logistics, a lot of people, that go to the retail stores don't understand the challenges with logistics. Just like what you mentioned, I know what we deal with, and that's not with a live animal. So I can't imagine the stress that you must have to deal with, that watching and hoping somebody else does the right thing.
Yeah. And the thing is, you control everything you can.
Yeah.
And then you get to a point where you no longer have control. But I've been up for 50 hours straight watching it and trying to stay on it, having people stand by. I mean, we've unpacked fish at 3:30 in the morning, and immediately straight into nursing them with oxygen and getting them, into a good state, a more stable state. And so, it's not just the cost of those things, but it's the logistics of having people that are willing to also work with us. It takes a team. This is not done by any one individual. So that means having multiple shifts and having people that are ready to just do what it takes to get those animals there, and like you said, David, it's one thing when it can be a day late, or, a container ship can be a week late, or even a month late. It's another thing. The animals can't wait. And so that's the hardest part.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then once you get the animals in, can you tell us like what's your quarantine process like, or what's the next steps to getting them into your systems?
So, there's a lot of rhetoric and things that we can say from a marketing standpoint about importing, especially fish. Coral obviously tend to be a little more tolerant, except for, as we were talking about earlier, acropora, when we were talking offline. Fish are very unforgiving. And so when they come in, I would be dishonest if I said, oh, it's just easy on them. They come in and everything goes great and there's no losses. It's a hard thing. It's a very difficult trip to take, for 30 hours and inside of a box in a limited amount of water. And when we're working with these animals and these specimens, you're responsible for, it's not like a puppy that you can just drug and put in a cage and he'll sleep for 12 hours and, whatever. We're responsible for what they breathe. And so when they come in, they're always going to be very stressed out. And I would also be dishonest if I told you we quarantined everything and guaranteed a disease-free animal. The nature of this business is volume. The only reason any importer can afford to do what we do, even to break even, would be volume. You have to move a lot of specimens. And in order to do that, that means they don't stay around very long. Yeah. So when our fish specifically arrive, we have a process by which they go into a 24-hour quarantine. That quarantine is not to remove all the diseases. It's not for the customer to get a completely clean fish. It is to ease the transition for this fish coming. I mean, it was swimming around in the ocean just days before.
Mhm.
It's to ease that transition. And so what we do is we actually bring them in. When you test the pH on most bags of water, you'll notice, because they've breathed a lot of carbon into the water, you're going to get a low pH, as low as 6.8. These are very low pHs for marine fish. In those cases, what we do is, if you were to bring the pH up quickly, it's going to shock the animal. They also have ammonia that they've been breathing from their own excrement through urea. That's in their blood. It gets turned into nitroglobulin. This is nitrogen in their blood. So if you were even to bring that pH up, that nitroglobulin would turn toxic and they will die within minutes, if not hours. So what we do is we actually buffer our receiving water down to a gradient that matches the bags. So we test from every box that we unpack. We test 3 bags. We match that pH into holding systems that each group will go into. And then we buffer that down and we put them in there, and we treat them with methylene blue. And what that does is helps to export some of that nitroglobulin and take some of the stress off. Over the next 24-hour period, they're slowly brought up using oxygen, and the ammonia is detoxified. So that when they finally get to the point where they're going to enter our systems, they are now up to our pH, they're matching our salinity, and their blood is clean of all this excess ammonia, and they're kind of de-stressed from the trip. They're kept completely in the dark, and that keeps their stress levels down as well. And then they're moved into our holding systems. So that's just the receiving part of it. On from there, when we talk about treatment, we treat for certain things that are common diseases, but the truth is that the amount of time that most specimens spend with us are so short, between 3 and 10 days. It's hard to do a proper disease quarantine treatment.
So you're treating for things that have an immediate effect on the fish, meaning the whatever is that's going to kill them now, and then because of volume, then you pass or not pass, but the retailer that you sell to is the one that takes the responsibility of treating the fish for the long-term diseases, kind of like the other stuff that they will quarantine for further time before they actually sell it to an end user. So
Right.
it is a staged thing, and you're responsible for the immediate, quick, fatal stuff, and then they pass it on, because like you said, and I appreciate, and Dave and I appreciate that honest response, that it's like, hey, it's at the end of the day, we care for it, but we also have a business, and you want to make some money, and it's a volume. It's all about volume.
Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't be able to have our facility open if we didn't do the numbers that we did, and that's just brass tacks.
Yeah.
Now, do we treat for disease? We absolutely do, but it is we don't see it as a responsibility of the store. We see it as a shared responsibility all the way
Okay.
down to the end user, because ideal situation, a fish comes in, it goes through our receiving process, goes into our system, is treated for 3-4 days. Say particular Acanthurus species, they tend to come in. The Zebramosus genuses tend to come in with a lot of cryptocaryon ick. In those particular cases, we immediately start treating with a therapeutic dose of copper. Now, that's treatment. We're treating for the disease. We're doing everything right. Is that going to cure them? No, it takes 21 days, if not more, to ensure that cryptocaryon is gone. We run roughly, I think, almost 1,000 watts of UV. We run ozone to break down some of these things. We run hyposaline. We run bare bottom tanks. But can I say that fish is not going to carry that disease? No, it's going to carry that parasite. It's going to carry that disease. What we try to primarily focus on is the first part is giving them that soft landing. And then we go into nutrition and stress reduction. So no tapping on the glass, no bright lights except for limited hours when customers are in. and then pounding, just power feeding, pounding away with high quality nutrition that contains different types of immunostimulants and appetite stimulants. And these, the faster you get these fish eating specifically, the faster they're going to recover, and the better they're going to do down the line. And that's really the key. And I'm so proud. I show it to customers all the time. As I walk through the facility, I go, watch this. And I just hover my hand over tanks, and you see all of our fish running to the top, and they've been there a week.
Yes.
I mean, they were swimming in the ocean 10 days ago. And I'm like, that is the power of, we feed 3 times a day. We broad spectrum feeding, we do appetite stimulants, and we get them to that point as fast as possible.
And that's 75% of the battle there, is to get them to eat.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why we have specific diets. We have species specific diets. So my team is not the happiest people in the morning because they're prepping, they're doing diet prep. And this is something I learned in public aquaria is, our commissary is sitting there with chopping up everything from silver sides to defrosting cyclops and getting the specific diets for the specific specimens on the fish side. And we do something similar on the coral side as well. Moving on to that kind of quarantine aspect, we do a lot with the corals come in, dipping is part of that, and then we move on to some of the more holistic and natural approaches where we use 6-line wrasses, tamarin wrasses, different types of planktivores that kind of focus on some of those external parasites. At the same time, we're treating with different things like flatworm exit and things like that to try and reduce the number of larger parasites. And then one of the things that we're doing now is we're actually dremeling their bases now, and kind of knocking off as much material as we can to get stuff off the base.
Are you seeing a lot of pests coming in with on corals now, or has that been helped remediated any from the suppliers overseas?
We're really particular about our suppliers. I know wholesalers that will go wherever it's cheapest, or some wholesalers have 20 suppliers, and that's so that you can have one of everything. We're really particular. I can say with full honesty that we visited the farm for every single one of our suppliers. We've been either underwater on their farms or in their facilities, and they are very good and knowledgeable. We have a good exchange of information where we teach them and they teach us. And so in that case, they are actually knocking off a great deal of the parasites before they get to us with the suppliers that we've chosen. And that's critical. Yeah. It's a partnership, and you have to work with all the stakeholders.
And it's good business, because if you find your supplier has healthy stock, you are more likely to go back there. You're more likely to go back there.
Sure.
Right. And it's about the user, the end user's experience. Our hobby, unfortunately, has a high turnover because if you don't have success early on, you just walk away. And that success is something that is created through every level, from you guys making great products that are easy to use, to us trying to get robust animals out there that people will be successful with, and even the more delicate ones, kind of discouraging people from getting them until they're an advanced level hobbyist.
You're so right, Mark. I mean, you see the turnover in this is the most alarming thing for me. I believe it's 18 months is APPA posted some time ago, but that's just unacceptable, really, to make the investment in this and you're out. And the number one reason is lack of success. That, animals dying.
Yeah.
So,
and it's hard.
Yep.
And it's hard for the end user to watch animals die. And they take that lack of success personally as well. But it really takes all of us. It takes all of us from every part of the chain to make that user experience good.
Yeah. So let's talk about, we've covered, importing corals, quarantine process, quarantine corals and fish, which is something that most people are familiar with, even at the end user. But let's jump into what people are not familiar with, and where we start to educate people as to why some livestock, some organisms are more expensive than the others. So let's talk about, the the big one is transportation and freight. Over the last few years, Mark, can you tell me how bad has it, how much exponentially has it gone up?
So just the easiest way I can illustrate this is pre-pandemic, we were paying $3.25 a kilo to transport fish or coral from Indonesia. And that's the most expensive service available. During the pandemic, we peaked out at $21 a kilo. We have come down, but when we say we've come down, we've come to $8 to $9 a kilo. On top of that, we're looking at fees at the airport. You know, there's many different parts that go into it. So there's from USDA releasing it to fish and wildlife fees to terminal fees. And so the airline only charges us for moving the freight. But when it leaves somewhere, there's somebody that loads that on the plane. And when it arrives somewhere, there's someone that takes it off the plane. And then there's somebody that handles it at the terminal. So we get all of these ancillary fees, and the fees just keep growing, not in dollar amount, but the number of fees. I've had organizations where they just don't even want to give it a name anymore because they're just adding it. I have fee 1, fee 2, fee 3. And it's just $10 here, $9 there, $35 here. And so again, those terminal fees we saw from pre-pandemic go from $35 to $50 to now we pay between $279 and $390 in those fees. I mean, that's just the fees. So that's why I say this is a volume business in the sense that we have to spread those across more. And so when you're talking about those types of pressures on the supply side, that's huge. Most people don't realize when they buy a fish, if they've bought a $10 fish, they go, oh, but it's so cheap. The guy's selling it to you overseas, you know, they sell it to you for $3, but then you pay $7 in freight. Then the fees, then your facility, you know, these and these only go up and up and up. They've never gone down. So that's a lot of pressure. And you know, if we can't raise prices at the till, and the store owners don't, you know, they can't afford to either, we're getting this kind of middle pressure where everybody's getting kind of squeezed. And that's I would say that's probably the hardest part of the business right now.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I think everybody, even Dave, us here at CoralVue, we're not dealing with livestock, but just we can relate. The fees are just
the
absolutely
just out of this world now.
Yeah, and we went from many transportation companies not that long ago, maybe a decade ago, and what you see is a lot of that transportation, and I know you guys have seen it in container prices. They've consolidated down just to a handful of companies, and so they can charge what they want now.
Yep.
And our industry comparatively to buying tchotchkes and TVs, you know, flat panel TVs, we're a small industry.
Yep.
And so they're non-negotiable with us. On top of that, you know, what we've seen in that side of things is the way that they handle the product has only gotten worse. They're less flexible. They're less concerned with the fact that we, you know, pay extra to get priority to get the, you know, the stuff moving. We have some good companies we work with, but on the other side, you know, it's us just kind of hopping up and down and screaming every shipment to try and keep things moving. And that's been a little tough too.
Yeah. So what about global supply, you know, just the chain disruptions? I mean, you know, things that happen unplanned for, you have to deal with as well. Like you said, 18 hours in Anchorage. I mean, that just, you have staff that you have to deal with that all the time. How do you do it?
It's having a great team. We deliberately try to overpay our employees so that they are more flexible and we don't have to have a massive team of people standing by. But and just training. We have SOPs for everything. So we have escalation SOPs where if this happens, then this, if this happens, then this, where we escalate and put different plans into effect so that we're prepared for it every time. You know, that is just the robust ability and being flexible. The other side of it is like I said, we have really high quality stakeholders that we work with on the other side of the world. And they are also looking out for us on that side. And so they're looking, we've gotten to the airport and not once or twice, but many times where they say, you know what, the weather just changed. We're going to eat the cost on this. We're not putting it on the plane. We'll take it back to the farm. They put it back in the ocean. A week later, we pick all new stuff and start over, just because we're like, that's too risky.
Mm.
Which brings me up to the next point. And, we're talking about supply chain, we're talking about freights and transportation. But what about the cost of things at the supplier end? Higher wages, higher costs. How does that go into the equation too?
Yeah, I mean, this is probably not going to be too popular to say publicly, but we buy. Our industry primarily buys from some of the poorest people on earth, right?
Yeah.
And so these people are getting paid almost nothing. We work really closely. Like I said, we've been to every farm. We've looked at working conditions, and we really work hard to try and be on top of our partners. And they actually generally, I would say, almost all of our partners pay 1.5 times what they should, which is good. And that's why one of the reasons we partner with them. But the other part of that is on the other side of the world where they're doing the collection and the farm maintenance and things like that. It's getting harder from the standpoint that the oceans are getting a lot more pressure. It's getting harder to either find certain things. I think David, you talked about difficult species, difficult things. Just this last week, I was working with a supplier. And we got red scooter blennies in, and I looked at the price and I said, wow, those jumped a lot. That's really high. And I said, I got to see if I can pass this along to our customers or if we're just going to have to sell it at a loss. And in those cases, or in this particular case, the gentleman I work with is saying, well, the collectors are now having to go to over 100 feet deep to collect them, and it's dangerous.
Wow.
And I said, really? And he's like, yeah, it's getting harder to actually find them. And so now, because of that, we had a meeting just last night, and we said, okay, is this a species that we should be bringing in? It's harder on the divers. It's raising the prices a lot. Is there really that much of a demand? And is this an animal that is highly successful in the aquarium trade? And so we made a concerted decision last night that we will no longer deal in that particular specimen because we just don't think it's as sustainable as it could be. Now that could change, different years, different things happen, different species,
Wow.
I bet it's seasonal too. Sometimes times of the year is really hard to get that fish, and other times of the year they come up, and it's much easier to get them.
Yeah, I mean, right now, it's peppermint shrimp season. Most of the consumers don't realize peppermints aren't available year round. You just can't collect them. They're actually a byproduct of the crabbing industry. When they pull the crab pots up, they're getting 150 peppermint shrimp on it. And so when crabbing season ends, that's it. No more peppermints. Nobody's getting them.
Yeah.
Wow.
What about regulation? Because I know regulation on both ends also adds to the expense, whether it's a direct contributor to the price or an indirect by holding things back. How do you deal with that?
I have to say federally, it's been really good. Fish and Wildlife, we work really well with them. And the Fish and Wildlife Service does an amazing job. They do an important job, and their price to us has not gone up in probably a decade. So that's very good. What we're seeing is state to state regulations are starting to really make things tough. I just had to take out a new license just to be able to ship to Florida. Where we see, some things like, small things like the Lacey Act, where we have to do specialty labeling now. We're seeing this kind of little bit of chaos as that kind of comes down. USDA just moved to a new computer system. We have to pay a little more. We see a little more problems waiting for them to push the button to issue the release. And then they go home at 5. And so then if they go home, then we have to get a hold of Washington, D.C. because they're the only ones with a 24-hour number. And so those types of things, those are complicating our business. And they're not driving price up as much as kind of the private industry and the state-by-state regulation. The state-by-state regulation has probably been from a regulatory standard, probably one of the tougher things.
Mark, does the collections differ from different regions? And
Well, under the Lacey Act, are you saying for the actually finding specimens in the wild?
yes.
Absolutely. There's different ranges for different things. I mean, even fish that we get out of Indonesia, they have they have the Pacific side and the Indian Ocean side, and we get two distinctly different versions of the same anthias, with distinctly different prices. Certain fish like Bellis angels and things like that, we can only get out of other areas like Philippines or out of Africa, a supplier in northern Africa. So to have the variety that people see at the pet store, it takes a lot. We go to a lot of different places in the world. We're very fortunate. One of our staff members is actually based out of Indonesia. So we have him fly all over Asia and Africa. And he's actually in, I think he's on his way to Vietnam right now to meet with a freshwater supplier. So we take that extra effort. We go and meet with our partners because we don't want this kind of transactional relationship. We want this kind of true partnership. And so as we do that, we have to go out and see them. And that's going to a lot of different places.
Wow. So is there different political challenges in these different regions that you
we were getting great fish out of Eritrea 3-4 years ago. And our guy that we send around literally landed on the tarmac as the plane was taxiing down the runway to pull off. Pickup trucks were flying through the gates and setting planes on fire. He turned right back around and flew out, and that was the end of that supplier. We can never go back and can't get another thing.
Gee.
Wow.
So, yeah. He's sending me videos and going, I don't think I'm going to be able to leave here. And thank goodness he left when he left, because they shut everything down within a day of that, and he would have been stuck there for months.
Wow.
What about government policies when it comes to sustainability? I mean, different governments doing different things, and you have to work around them. I'm not going to say around them, but you got to work with them.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say things have been changing a lot in recent times. One of the things that we've seen a lot is the places we can get livestock is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And that's because certain countries are just stopping it. The ones that we deal with, Indonesia has done a pretty impressive job of controlling the fisheries, and they're really trying to get a wrangle on it. I wouldn't say I'm particularly excited about their wild caught policies or their wild collection policies, but they made suppliers, when they reopened, choose to either be cultured coral or wild coral. And by doing that, they were able to push probably 80% of the suppliers out of the wild coral business, which is fantastic for the wild populations. And then they have a really big aquaculture program which incentivizes growing coral on farms. So that's good policy,
Yeah.
And that kind of brings us into the next segment that I was going to talk about, which is, you can't talk about collecting fish and corals without talking about sustainability and the future of the industry. And it's a double-edged sword, because it makes it more complicated for you. But at the end of the day, part of you, 50% says of you, thank you for doing that, even though you're making my job harder. It's a tough one, right? It's a balancing act for you. But what kind of things do you think hobbyists can do in terms of purchasing power or purchasing methods to help with sustainability?
I mean, and that's an awesome question, because that's where the rubber meets the road, right? So at that juncture, their decision is going to influence a lot more than policy. It's going to influence the industry demand, right? And that's what's going to dictate what's coming. Of course, prioritizing captive bred fish makes a big difference. but there's fish that you simply will never see captive bred. It's just not the act of captive breeding them is unsustainable because they're just such a pelagic fish.
Hmm.
Coral is much easier, but what I think the hobbyists should really prioritize is their ability to keep that specimen alive. The robust ability of that particular species. I want is one thing, but should I is the question they should be asking.
Yeah.
So I want a 9-foot shark, but I have a 120-gallon aquarium. So if I get a shark pup in that can barely turn around in there, but he fits, that's not a responsible choice for the future. And so the same thing goes for, like I said, those red scooter blennies. When we're looking at them, we're saying these have very poor survivability. Somebody is risking their life to go get them, and the only way that the hobbyists can find this out is just researching, reading, listening to experts, things like that, and learning more about the species. When I was working in a pet shop, the hardest thing to sell in a pet shop was a book. I could get somebody to drop $2,000 on an aquarium. And when I tried to sell them the $20 book, they could not care less about the book. And what I would have to explain to them is like, listen, this is going to dictate your success, but it's also going to give you the knowledge that you need to become an informed purchaser.
Right.
And that is your responsibility. So this idea, of jumping in, people want the biggest possible tank. They'll spend as much as they can on that. But you also have to invest in your personal knowledge. And when you're first starting out, or starting with things like captive bred clownfish and things like that, are going to take you much further and give you a better experience while you build your knowledge base. And then you can transition to ever harder to keep species. But you have to look at the species that you're considering, and you don't just look at it based on its color or beauty or things like that. You have to look at it and go, okay, well, how sustainable is this? Where is this fish coming from? Can I give it that type of care? We're trying to adopt a pit bull right now. We're going to take probably 5 or 7 visits with this pit bull to make sure that it can adapt. It lives in the city. Can it adapt to our lifestyle and the way that we live right now? And that's a pit bull, and they're pretty bulletproof, right? And so you have to kind of do the same thing with a fish. Am I going to be able to give it what it needs to get out of it the enjoyment that I need? And that's, I think, from the hobbyist level, to answer your question, is they have to really understand what they're putting into their aquarium. Carlos, you and I know, you don't go out and buy a Suhar Sonoy when you have 3 soft corals in your tank and you've been in the hobby for 7 months. You're just going to kill it, right?
You're just going to kill it.
And so that's the same thing.
I remember a couple of years ago, and I think, Dave, you were there. We were in California visiting for one of the shows, and we stopped at one store, and there was a lady that just came in, and she was looking for fish, and she actually took out a printed Excel sheet that she had of every fish that she wanted to have.
That's excellent.
She had not purchased anything. She says, "These are the fish that I want." And I've researched them, and I think they play well together. And everybody was just like, "What?" And went over to meet her because it was such a unicorn. And it's sad to say it, because most of us buy first, ask questions later.
Right.
And it should be the other way around.
Yeah.
Right. And even at the store level, when you're asking, the store owner, there is a kind of there's a responsibility with the store, but at the same time, he's trying to pay his rent this month. So is he going to say, no, you shouldn't buy that $300 fish or that $300 coral? Well, he's kind of like, they should really have that, but I'm going to make $300. So he has a kind of a conflict of interest there. So it's really up to you to learn, and being a little pretentious here, but what I would have loved and been mind blown would have been that Excel spreadsheet having extra columns showing where the fish comes from, what it eats, what the demands are. That is where we really should be if we're talking about sustainability, stewardship, and keeping the quality high and having a good overall experience,
Yeah. So what do you think about the future of fish and coral imports? Let's look ahead. Let's look, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years from now.
Well, I can tell you this, we're offline. You and I were talking a little bit, and I was telling you about the uranema problem with, green chromis these days. And we're seeing, some problems with that. Our supplier has now offered us fish from a different bay on a different side of an island that is highly separated from all of the other populations. They're bigger, they're more robust, they're really good looking green chromis, and they're not carrying uranema, but they're 3 times the price, right? And so is the consumer going to be willing to pay that? So we're going to find the sources, right? It's getting tougher and tougher, but we will find the source. Where do I see the future being? I see the future being it's going to get more expensive, and that's just the way it is, as it should be. It's going to take more thought because it's more expensive. If we pay more, we're going to have more value around it. I mean, Carlos, you go back with me. You remember Joe's Unique, a wholesaler here in Chicago, going way back. I'm talking 25 years ago. And I was cleaning out my office, and I stumbled across an old invoice I had from them from 25 years ago. And I looked at it, and the prices on the fish are almost the same today. It was only a couple
it sure don't feel like it.
If we're talking about Japanese swallowtails or high-end fish, yes, we've seen those prices go up. But a clownfish, Hephatis blue tang, these fish have not gone up. If anything, a few of them have gone down. And I looked at that and I said, how are we pulling that off? And again, and that's why you see the industry struggling, because it's a situation where we're not paying what these animals are worth. And so I do see the industry probably becoming more conservative, probably a little bit smaller. But I do see a more educated hobbyists, especially with social media, guys like you guys out here doing these types of things. It's educating the public more so they know what they're getting into. And it's not that, spray and pray, throw it in and try it out. Let's see how it works. And price will dictate that. And I think it should, in my opinion. But that's where I see us going. I think we're going to get more educated hobbyists ultimately. I think we're going to see people who are more conservative with their purchases, but everything's going to get more expensive, and it has to.
Do you see captive breeding continuing to increase, or what do you think? Is that something that's sustainable going forward?
So captive breeding is not driven by the ability to captive breed. Okay. The biggest influence on captive breeding is what people will pay. You cannot take a fish from the ocean that is pelagic and breeds, in 130 feet of water, and bring it and captive breed it and say it's going to be the same price as the wild one. As long as there's a sustainable wild population, a captive bred fish will have trouble competing with that fish.
Just due to price.
It's so much cheaper to get a wild specimen. Now, guys like Dr. Matt Wittenrich from Poma Labs doing an incredible job of breeding extremely high quality specimens that are, chomping down on pellets and flakes and highly robust. Does a great job. He's marketing awesome fish. I work with Bali Aquarich. We make purchases from them. Has a huge list of captive bred specimens. And even him, at first, the price is high until it becomes a mass market thing and you've exhausted that kind of high-end hobbyist. Then the price has to come down or you get priced out by the wild stuff. And so I would say that will be the biggest influencer. Now, as climate is changing, seas are warming, currents are changing, we're seeing it getting harder and harder to get specific things. And I think that opens the door for more captive breeding. But to say we can just because we can doesn't mean the hobbyists will spend the money.
Right. But is that something maybe hobbyists should be asking for? That are willing to spend is to have a captive bred fish?
Yeah, I mean they're more sustainable, they're more robust for the most part. They are generally you're going to have more control over how they look. So I think the nice thing about, like, designer clowns taught us is that we can have some unique things that that really stimulate the hobby. So I think there's a lot of value in it.
Awesome. Well, Mark, where can people learn more about sustainable and what you're doing, and should they go to their local store and ask? I mean, you're doing such a great job with this. You're taking care of your animals that I think hobbyists need to know and maybe ask for having a supplier that actually cares for the animals and puts the effort in that you are doing.
Yeah, we're wholesale only, so the consumer has to really drive the store to carry our stock. But our website is Seastainable Supply, so it's not sustainable, it's SEA, seastainablesupply.com. There they can definitely learn about our mission and more information about us. We're going to be introducing some new videos and TikToks just talking about certain aspects and certain species to get more information out there, since we have a lot of experts on staff. So that would be your best option. And I'm not going to say don't tell your store to try and get it from us. I wouldn't turn it down.
Oh yeah. So any final thoughts, anything that you want to, tell I mean, we have that, we understand you because we are wholesalers. So having that conversation between us and the end user is very difficult because you always have the retailer in the middle that does it. So is there anything that you want to tell the end user, the listeners, that, take this opportunity?
Just keep learning more. The beauty of this hobby and why I've always been involved in it is because you never get to the end. There's always something new to learn, and you're never going to be good at it, because as soon as you get good at one thing, you're going to find out there's this whole other thing you didn't know. Right? It really is.
Your tank crashes and you get a big humbling experience. It's like, you're not that good.
Nope.
And I mean, Carlos, we know guys that have been doing this for multiple decades and they've had tank crashes. There's always something to learn, and I get bored easily, so that has been a big part of my stimulation. But you got to hang in there and stick with what you're capable of. Don't overreach. Don't become just a collector. Really work with something that's going to bring you joy and keep you happy. My wife, my daughter, all of us park right in front of our fish tank every winter when the snow is a foot outside and just watch those fish swim. And it's probably the most comfortable thing to have a hot cup of tea and just watch, the reef doing its thing. So I think my biggest message is, you guys are doing a great job. You're communicating really well. Like you said, we don't get a chance to talk direct to most consumers, but doing what you guys are doing is great. And I think they need to be looking for more of this kind of inside and honest and plain information that, that they're getting from you guys, and stick with it. Just stick with it. I'd like to publicly thank you guys for all the help you've given us. As you know, we run our facility on hydros, and it's given us so much data to work with to take scientific approaches to the way we do things. On top of that, it's given us so much sense of security and ability for my staff to really be on top of things, and right down to me traveling around the world and still being able to be in touch with what's going on in our facility. And hydros has been a big part of that, and you guys have been a big part of that.
We appreciate that. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We are on Spotify as a podcast audio, and we are also on YouTube. Thank you for watching, and until next time.